Hey friends, I'm Christy and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one's for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. It's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall even when it makes waves. Hey, this is Christy Hughes. I am back with Rock the Damn Boat. If you are watching, you may notice I'm in a rather unusual setting. I am out in our barn because I'm re-recording for an episode. I would just felt like I was really scattered in the episode, and as I've shared with you in the past, it's kind of a one take, very little editing, in other words, no editing for the first few episodes. So this one might have to be spliced together a little bit. It's all good. I love the creative process. This is why I am loving this podcast format so much more than I thought I would. And here I am in the barn to allow for my husband to finish his work day without bothering him with my recording. And instead, I am out here. I had to feed the horses because they were going to be very annoyed if I was out here and not feeding them. And if you are into ASMR, you are welcome because there are horses eating in the background, and so we have a very noisy eater, our new horse Josie. But I also have my "Hold Your Horses" T-shirt on today, which felt very appropriate to then record in the barn. So here we are. Rock the damn boat. I am a recovering people pleaser here to help you learn how to use your voice to speak up, to talk about things that we might normally not talk about in polite society. Now, we're not going all the way to the point of trying to offend or shock people, but just bringing to light some things that people typically might keep to themselves. And today we're going to talk about the root of people pleasing and sort of origin story, including mine and how I ended up making a lot of decisions in my life to please other people, ignoring the signs that I had for what I might want to do with my life and how I might want to live it and my creative expression, and then get into what that means today and the fact that I am leaving corporate retail after 30 plus years. I look back at the start of my people pleasing, and like many people, many of my listeners probably, we were raised to be good girls, and especially if you were raised in the church, then there were manners and behaviors that we needed to adhere to because it was the kind and right thing to do. So there is an element of kindness and generosity that is connected and forever will be connected to people pleasing. It is the healthier point of people pleasing. When we start to be kind and good and generous to others without any regard to ourselves and what we want, that's when we venture into people pleasing territory. I think it becomes really difficult as a young person and as a young child. And I am not a psychologist, so I am not speaking from any studies or case studies that I am aware of, but I'm sure you could go down the path and research the effects that this has on young children. But from my experience, I know that when I was good to others and kind to others, I was praised. And there is a lot of research out there pretty commonly floating around about how we become almost addicted to that praise. And when we do something right and we do something good, or maybe it's making good grades, that as a child, when we receive that validation or that affirmation that we are good because we did this kind act or because we made good grades, we did something nice for others, then we learn, okay, that's how I am special, and that is where my self worth comes from. It's very difficult, and I can't even think of how that might look as, say, a 5 or a 6 year old to have any kind of intrinsic self esteem. Because at that point in your life, pretty much everything that you're doing is informed by friendships and parents and siblings. I have a half brother who is 9 years older than me. So when I was 5, he was a teenager. I was probably a pesky, annoying little sister who, he'd spent some time with us, but mostly lived with his mom and stepdad. So he had to come hang out with this annoying 5 or 6 year old that he didn't really know. We'd go on family vacations, and he did like any big brother did, and he picked on me all the time. And now I'm married to someone who picks on me all the time. So I'm understanding at this point that it is definitely a male thing. Some boys never grow up. So I've got like a 50-year-old husband who sometimes acts like a teenager. So there's this element of it's always going to be maybe enmeshed in gender roles or how we were raised, that boys pick on girls, boys pick on each other. So there was some element of me feeling small because of a bigger brother, an older brother who was also bigger in the sense of like physically larger. So there was that was coming at me. There was boys at school that picked on me, and I they can come up with names for anything. My maiden name is Campbell, and I was Campbell Soup as a kid. And heaven forbid, I think I've talked about this on the show. Like heaven forbid you have a last name like Dick that could be, I mean, that's like material for weeks. But I had Campbell, and it was Christy Campbell Soup. And I would get so mad at those boys. And I had fingernails that I would use to defend myself. And I would dig in with my fingernails until they apologized. So I'm not sure who was bullying who, but that was how I lashed out. And then we had, my parents never put a lot of pressure on me, but when I think about at that point, I had a really accelerated reading level. And so I was reading pretty advanced for a 5 or 6 year old. I was starting to do well in school right off the bat. So I also got this external validation from schoolwork and grades and teachers. I still have in my tote of mementos a photo album that has all of the old achievement awards that I got, whether it was attendance or honor society or whatever all of those excellence awards are that you get when you're in school. And it was like nothing beat walking across that stage to claim my paper certificate, get a handshake from the principal. That was what my self worth was tied up in. Again, I don't know, and I would love to understand how it is that at a young age you could potentially have some sort of self worth from within. I hear a lot of research around our personalities forming from the time we're born to time, I believe 7 or 8 is the sort of the magic age of like anything that happens before then forms who you are. So I can understand all of this external influence. And when you learn that making other people happy in some way, grades, kind gestures, doing something for them, that becomes how you create self-worth. And that is a fast road to people pleasing, because who am I? I'm the person who does nice things for others. I was in Girl Scouts, nothing against that tremendous organization. Like, it is wonderful that as young girls, we learn how to do kind things in the world and do good things for the planet and do nice things for senior citizens. Those are all amazing things. And those things can definitely lead to having self esteem because you are kind to others. For me, it was always external validation. I don't know why it took so long for me to start to create that inner self worth and self love, but it did. And we'll get to that at some point. Might not even be today's episode because we have a lot to talk about with people pleasing and how people pleasing defines how we carve out the rest of our lives. So wherever you're at age 7 or 8, your personality is starting to form, and if that starts to involve people pleasing, because up to this point you've gotten praise and validation from others, then you start to live your life for those other people. And when I got to teenage years, I started to value self expression even more. And if I were to define my core values today, which is an exercise that I have done in sobriety, there's definitely a lot of emphasis around independence and freedom of expression, self expression. That's why I have so many tattoos. Back then, it showed up as wanting to dress a little funky. One of my favorite movies still to this day is Pretty in Pink. And if you are of the John Hughes era, oh my gosh, some amazing movies at that time. I'm always making references to Breakfast Club and being the Ali Sheedy versus Molly Ringwald sort of dual identity of that movie. But my favorite was Pretty in Pink. I loved how Andy would take thrifted clothes and make them into something new, and I thought everything she wore was so cool. I was not into the designer clothes and the fancy cars. I valued her self expression and her independent style. I started wearing a lot of black and big baggy clothes, and I loved everything from Express. And the funkier, the better. I started to draw, and I had written poetry as a young girl, but my poems started to get a little bit dark. And I was reading a lot of Stephen King, Dean Koontz. I started dabbling in tarot cards and learning more about the metaphysical world. So, what I had a book on astral projection, and I remember reading about that and thinking, oh, maybe there's some possibility that I can leave my body. Uh, yeah, I don't know that that's possible. I've certainly never done it, but I was willing to explore that idea as a teenager. I I look back now and I see everything that ultimately formed my personality. If I look at who I am today and when I feel the most authentic, it was that teenage self who loved the idea of the great unknown, that I was going to church, going to Methodist church. I started church hopping because I just didn't feel connected to God in any of those particular buildings. Today, I talk to God every day, and it might be from right here in the barn, or it might be from the couch while I'm drinking coffee in the mornings. I have been able to find my own path of spirituality, and I see now how that was what I was seeking as a 14 or 15-year-old. But as a people pleaser and as a huge fan of my grandmother, who Polly Campbell is my role model. I wrote all about her in my memoir, Strong Roots, Wayward Soul. I definitely wanted to please her because she was the sweetest, most generous spirit I knew in my life. So I helped her by going to volunteer. I wanted to make a good impression on her. We did everything that she wanted to do for holidays and loved all of the traditions that we built into our family in that way. I had trouble telling her that I was not involved with church. And in college, she would always ask me, "Have you found a church home yet? Have you found a church home?" And I said, "Oh, no, Granny, I'm still looking." And I continued trying to find a connection to God through Young Life and various churches around town. My people pleasing wasn't harmful at that time as it relates to my spirituality, but I was definitely trying my best to fit into that mold of a good Christian and what that looked like in my family, which was being a devout Methodist, going to church regularly, and I felt like I was letting her down and it was really tough. So we had religion that was always prescribed to me growing up. Then in high school, you start thinking about what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And for some people, that is prescribed just as rigidly as religion. So for some people, there is an expectation put on them. They're going to be a doctor, they're going to be a lawyer, they're going to take over the family business. I feel for people who have zero choice in, well, I take that back because everybody has a choice. But I feel for those who have so much pressure on them to pick a particular career path that they may or may not be interested in. I didn't have a really clear cut idea of what that looked like. Now, I go back to so going back to that tote, and I hope everybody has a tote of mementos that they can go explore and see what was I like when I was younger. So in my tote of mementos, there was a school project, and this was junior high, and I stated in there that I wanted to be a child psychologist. Looking back, I strongly believe it was because I wanted to be the help that I needed at that time in my life. Now, I don't know that I knew that and that I understood exactly what help I needed, but I think that is why I wanted to be a child psychologist. I didn't start group therapy until high school, so that definitely wasn't influencing that decision at that time. But I have to wonder if that was a little hint to myself of, wow, I could really use someone who could listen to me and that I would feel comfortable talking to. Because try as they might, my poor parents, they always wanted to boost me up. They always wanted to make me feel confident, and I in my world, in my brain, just didn't take their praise and their influence to heart. It was always more about friends and boys, and it would get even more magnified later. So, child psychologist, and then I got into high school. I'm making good grades. I learned recently from reading actually, it was that same paper that I said something about my wanting to be that I was on track to be a national merit scholar, that was my goal. And I put in parentheses that it was actually what my dad wanted for me. And every parent wants their child to succeed. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me to put that in parentheses as if that wasn't what I truly wanted in my heart just gives me pause and makes me think back to all the different ways that I tried to impress others that might not have been authentic to me. Now, school came easily to me. So in classes, I would do well. Fast forward to college, where I had to study on my own, and I really struggled. And by then, I was drinking heavily, and I just couldn't master the art of studying on my own. So if it wasn't done hands on in class, then I was not making good grades like I had in high school. And most listeners will know the college format, all lecture, reading, very little is taught hands on. And so it was a different learning environment for me and one in which I did not thrive. I graduated top 10% of my class of 722 people. And I would have graduated with over 900 people at Martin High School. And I don't know where I would have ranked there, but either way, I graduated top 10%. I was able to get into Texas A&M. And so I was a smart cookie. And I probably would have been on track for National Merit Scholar. Uh, I wanted to get a scholarship to college so that I could go to a very prestigious college. At the time, I remember my dad talking about William and Mary. I wanted to go to Brown for two reasons. One, it was a liberal arts college, and two, it was the top ranked advertising school at that time. Somewhere along the way, from child psychologist to actually getting to college, I discovered a love of advertising for the sake of marketing and the design that went behind it. So I thought it would be really cool to create content and to create jingles and to help with this creative world of commercials. And at the time, of course, we were watching TV commercials. Now you can fast forward through all of them or pay a premium to have ad free television. But at the time, commercials really forged what we who we became, what influenced us. Children of the 80s, I still remember jingles from commercials back then. So, talk about things that make us want to please others. We were getting bombarded by a lot of different messages from advertising, but I thought it would be cool to create that type of content somewhere along the way. So I had that idea. My aunt was always telling me, because I did so well in French and I was in French honors classes, she told me I should be an international lawyer, that's how I would make a ton of money. I could go live in France, I could do international law. And I had the smarts for it. I could have gone that route. So I had all these different people in my life telling me what I would be great at, what type of career I could choose. And I didn't really know what to do. And in some cases, that's what counselors and guidance counselors and family members are for, is to help you. Career counselors, they're certainly not a hard and fast rule that you have to know exactly what you want to do when you graduate from high school. So this is not suggesting that I was pleasing anyone by choosing the career I did. And in fact, I ended up going marketing. So I knew I wanted to go to the business school at A&M, and I ended up going marketing because it was a pretty broad degree. And there were advertising electives and there were also retail electives. And I had started retail in my senior year in high school. So I knew that was an option for me to get involved with retailing studies. So, in a way, I chose exactly what I wanted. However, I also chose marketing because graduates from the marketing school made the most money getting out of college. So, all of that liberal arts discussion and all of these things that I wanted to do with creativity and freedom of expression shifted into how I needed to make the most money. And I think that's where I started to prioritize a successful life over a creative life. And I watched how hard my parents worked. My dad was an engineer and he did well for our family. My mom did all kinds of cool things in her career. She worked in a more technical job for a while, but she also worked at a party store. She stayed home with me at various points in her career. So my parents modeled career people, and it wasn't as if I didn't want to have a career. I just don't know that I would have chosen what I did if I hadn't been influenced by however many different people told me that, it was about money and being successful rather than being creative, because nobody wants to be a starving artist. I mean, who tells you, hey, go out and be a starving artist? Nobody. One of the things that is, and if you're watching, you'll see this and you might hear it. One of the things that came out of my tote of mementos was an aptitude test and career interest inventory. And I'm not sure, I couldn't find, so copyright 1990. Let's see. Oh, 10th grade. Okay, so I didn't realize before that this actually had a grade on it. So again, thinking about how you get influence to start your career. I was at Martin High School, grade 10, test date October of 1990. So let's see, my aptitudes, national percentile bands. Where did I fall? High. Um, mechanical reasoning, interesting. Abstract reasoning, high, interesting. Uh, less high, perceptual speed and accuracy. Don't know, but yeah. Um, got very high in numerical reasoning, space relations, spelling. Okay, I won the school spelling bee in 5th and 6th grade. No surprise that I got a 99 here on spelling. So yeah, I don't know what exactly all this means, but it translates into career recommendations. High on my list, top of my list, over on the high of low, medium, high, fine arts. There you go. Very clear. Examples of careers in this field include writer, musician, cartoonist, artist, editor, or news reporter. So there we go. Sophomore year, I was destined to be a writer. Amazing. That did happen later in life. Editor, I did toy with this idea as a career for a while. Who knows? Never too late. Another area of interest is agriculture. Okay, so here's some irony with me sitting in the barn that we have. Now, it does say that agriculture, okay, so for example, some people raise crops and manage farms, others may train animals, and still others may tend to gardens. Okay, I definitely love gardening. Not so, I mean, sure, we raised animals, so not definitely ended up in that area of my life, but wouldn't have chosen that for a career back then. I was not an FFA kid. I was an FHA kid, got a scholarship for my toffee my senior year in high school. That's another story for another day. So, down in subject areas, likes creative writing, business law or management. Maybe my aunt was on to something. Cooking or sewing, not great at either of those. Music or art, photography, speech or drama. Speech, here we are, podcasting. It was all written in my career interest inventory my 10th grade year. Now, plumbing or welding, electronics, carpentry or home building, automotive repair, all of those at the bottom of the list. Here's some irony too. Where did it tell me? Okay, so the very bottom of the list has sales. And what have I been doing for the last 10 years? I've been in sales. Now, I have done fine at it, probably because of my aptitude for speech and drama, because, you know, with drama, I mean, sales is a little bit of acting, I suppose. But I ultimately ended up going into buying, which I talked about in my I Quit Retail episode. So I won't get into that here. But this is the type of thing that you go through as a teenager to decide what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And it is always okay to change your mind. I'm just going to clear that up right here. Did you choose a career driven by people pleasing? Did you feel pressured to follow in someone's footsteps? Did you feel pressured to pick a certain career? Did you feel pressured to be a success? in someone else's eyes. Those are the things that you can start to think about when you try to get back to the root of your people pleasing. And especially if it makes you frustrated and upset these days because you have trouble setting boundaries. Now, would I have told my parents, hell no, send me to Brown. I don't care where you want me to go. And then I would have forced them to pay the tuition there if I hadn't gotten a scholarship? No, I mean, what influence do you have as a 17-year-old necessarily? So, until you're 18 and adult, and then you still probably can't make it on your own, then you get to decide. So there's an element of just respecting your parents when it comes to uh, not setting boundaries or respecting their boundaries. But once you get into your career, how long do you stay in something that you don't like? For me, I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't like it, but I always felt this pull toward something more creative and purpose filled. And when I got sober 7.5 years ago, it became even more apparent that I needed to give back in a bigger way, that I needed to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do that lit me up. Because for a long time, retail did. And for a long time, it was a great career with a great paycheck. At times, it was long hours. At times, it was a lot of pressure. Over time, it became less influenced by my experience and more influenced by other teams and more data analysis. And that's happening with everything in the world. So it's not anything new in any industry. But I remember at one point when we created at my old job a strategic pricing plan committee and a promotional governance committee and all these different people who would influence my decisions, that I remember one of the big bosses saying to me that buying no longer involves gut. And I was told early on by a boss that I had a great instinct, that I had great intuition, and it was really discouraging. I also have a fly buzzing my face, hazard of recording in the barn. I was told that I had great intuition, and so to be told that there is no more gut in buying, that it's all science and no art, that was when I started to fall out of love with retail, and that was probably 10 years ago. And I didn't stay in buying that much longer. I did move and pivot into sales because that used the skill set that I was really good at, and to some degree, maybe less about intuition, but then I was able to really leverage my skills at relationship building. And so with account management, it's all about, getting to know somebody and create that relationship and create that trust. So I stayed in retail because I was in a different avenue of it. And then, just these last couple of years being as tough as they are in the retail world, I realized that I needed to let go of what I thought my career should look like, let go most recently of this idea that I was going to let everybody around me down. Because when you have built something so solid, like a career that I had, going from an administrative assistant in a buying office to a director of sales for a multi-million dollar company. When you have built this career over time and that is so entrenched in your identity, and people look to you to hold that role and to represent that role, it is hard to walk away. And I understand the pressure of that. I'm letting down a boss who I've had a great relationship with. I am really rocking the damn boat in my own household to say, I am not going to have a steady paycheck. I believe in myself and I'm going to go out and create a new path. And I need you to believe in me, husband. Then that's really rocking the damn boat that I am sitting in. I told my parents, and of course I'm 50, so they support whatever I'm doing. They've seen me thrive at different things like writing a book, like my career, like helping others and inspiring others. So there was no need to worry about people pleasing with them, but there was a part of me that was afraid to have that conversation. I think back now to when I told my grandmother that I was getting a divorce. And I was so afraid to tell her. I thought I was going to have let her down so badly because our family so believes in the institution of marriage. And my parents have been married over 50 years, and my grandmother had been with my granddad for over 50 years, but she went with it. She wanted me to be happy, and I think sometimes our people pleasing is in our own mind, that maybe that person will not have the reaction that we expect if we just speak our truth. And that's probably a really big topic for another day, but I do think that we can sometimes be surprised by people's reactions, that we have built it up so big in our heads that when we actually say the words, the person didn't have the response that we expected. And most people who know me know I absolutely love Brene Brown. And in one of her books, she talks about the story I was telling myself. So sometimes our people pleasing and our resentment toward that person because we're doing everything for them, and we feel that loss of identity, but sometimes it's the story that we're making up in our own heads. So I am chucking the idea of people pleasing it when it comes to my career, and I am going to go out and forge a new path. I am grateful to be supported by so many friends and family and people willing to help make this new chapter a success. Did people pleasing keep me in this career path as long as it did? Possibly, possibly. But I think there also is an element of right place, right time, and finally creating the right mindset to go out and do it. I have let go of people pleasing in so many other parts of my life that this felt like the biggest one where I needed to let go. And I had trained for it, right? I had set boundaries in other parts of my life. I protected work life balance for as long as I could. I stopped caretaking in relationships. Now, can my husband operate in the kitchen? No. So I take care of us when it comes to actually eating and nutrition. But, I envy some of my friends who have husbands who cook all the meals, but it's okay. I don't mind supporting our nutrition and our health in that way. But when it comes to truly caretaking and losing my identity, that disappeared with this relationship. If you read my book, Strong Roots, Wayward Soul, you can read about all of the horrible dysfunctional relationships I had where I absolutely was people pleasing and caretaking and let go of my identity. But I'm grateful to be in a very solid and mutually respectful relationship. So that's it for today. I wanted to talk a little bit about, people pleasing in your career, how that shows up with decisions that we make in our lives, because it starts early and it can turn into this path that we're on that eventually we don't even recognize ourselves. And I look back at this little aptitude test, and maybe you can find something from your past that was, career counseling or some kind of interest that you had when you were younger, and realize that there was something else that was meant for you in this lifetime. And it is never too late. So I am living proof of that. I ran a half marathon at 39. I published my book at 46. I got sober at 43. I opened a yoga studio at 48. I am here launching this podcast at age 50. Never too late to go back and pursue the fine arts career that you were always supposed to have. So, regardless of what that means for you, feel free to rock the damn boat. You are allowed to. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to do what is on your heart, regardless of whose boat it rocks. So I will see you or talk to you again at the next episode. Please follow and subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. And a 5-star review would be amazing. You can watch this on Spotify or you can watch it on YouTube now and follow along there. So thank you so much for your support, and I will talk to you soon.